like we are live. Welcome to Bam Fight Club, first live stream.
Ever.
I'm Colby, this is Fernando. How's it going, Frank?
Good, man. Just excited about some of these results this weekend and excited to make a show about it, about some of the results and seeing who can keep that up. And then, in talking about it, we discussed like Jim Miller's win this weekend. Very impressive. He's continuing the most, appearances in UFC streak and continuing to win. And then decided to talk about who else is getting up there in age and who's able to compete and hang and go. So we're going to be talking about fighters who are 35 years old and older and how they're doing and how they've been doing since the new year.
Yeah, let's talk about Jim Miller first because we just saw that. How crazy is that Jim Miller, he's now, I think, tied with Donald Trump for the most fights in the UFC. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's up there. Most victories, I think. Because appearance-wise, he's like close to 40 appearances in the UFC, and that's outrageous.
Yeah, and he won by knockout. So it's one thing to be tied with Cerrone, but one thing about Cerrone is he lost the last five fights to his spot, or 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, Jim Miller, he's at that record for UFC fights, and then he knocks the guy out, an up-and-comer.
Yeah, and it's a guy an up-and-comer who's been knocking people out. And from what I saw, he was getting the better of him and just was able to win the way that people thought he was going to lose. I thought he was going to get knocked out. I personally chose him to win, just hoping he would win. And it came to fruition, so that's super exciting to see that.
Yeah, Jim Miller, 38 years old, and still fighting competitive fights, fighting an up-and-comer, knocked him out in the second round, Nicholas Motos last weekend. Yeah, I was very surprised and impressed, and yeah, it was awesome to see. So did you see, was there anything in particular in that fight? Anything else that stood out besides obviously the great finish?
Yeah, Miller deciding to stand up. Miller, to me, has always been a person who can wrestle, can, drag the fight into deep waters and make it last. And he's not one who's been known for his striking at all. Ever. And the last 2 fights, him winning by, knockouts and getting stoppages over these guys who are up-and-comers. And some people might see him as a gatekeeper at this point because he's not going to fight for the title. He's not going to be high-ranked, top 10. But, they're essentially showing him to these guys to be like, prove yourself, do you belong? And he's knocking them out. So,
we talked about in our fight analysis with Moda, one of the things I was curious about, you mentioned Moda had kind of an awkward, unorthodox striking style, and I was curious if Jim Miller, as veteran, was, if Moda's style something that's innovative and new and it's going to work, or is Miller, being the veteran, going to expose that really this is not an innovation, it's just kind of an awkward style that works against low-level guys. And I don't know if this completely answers that question, but Miller, it seems like he had exposed that this style was not necessarily the innovation that people are going to be picking up on.
yeah, no, for sure. So, with that being said, it made us go back and look at some of the fights from, the beginning of the year till now. And, starting with UFC on ESPN 32, Cater versus Chikadze. And looking at, how some of these older fighters did in their respective bouts. So in, looking at one of the fights was Court McGee versus Brian Kelleher. It was the third fight on the fight card, and the second and third fights on the fight card. Brian Kelleher, had a win. He's 35 years old, won by unanimous decision. And Court McGee, at 37, won by unanimous decision. what were your thoughts on those fights, Colby?
Well, I'll start with the McGee fight. That was one where I believe, if I recall correctly, I picked the other guy who went Brahmash. I was pretty impressed looking at Brahmash. His past several fights, he seemed like just a very strong grappler, if I recall correctly. Brahmash was able to just completely manhandle the previous opponent to McGee. And the way I think he went for a really fast submission and was just able to complete dominant fashion. So it really surprised me to see Brahmash was not at all able to do that with McGee. McGee's a real well-rounded fighter. So it definitely came as a shock to me. McGee's not super fast. Obviously he's getting older, which is why we're talking about him. But yeah, I just thought, this guy's younger, he's fast, he's strong, he has a dominant performance, and he goes up against McGee. Kind of like with Jim Miller. It's hard to tell with some of these up-and-comers, do they just look so dominant because of the competition they're going against, or are they so dominant because they really have those skills that are going to take them to the top of the UFC? And this is, I think, just another example of what you do with the lower levels of regional fights and things like that, and other smaller organizations doesn't necessarily carry over, and the same strategies and techniques aren't going to work with the top guys in the UFC.
Yeah, Court McGee, very impressive in his win. He's one of those fighters that I am excited to watch every time. He goes out there, gives it his best, gives it his all. He's not a lay and pray, just hold kind of fighter. He doesn't have the best stand-up, doesn't have the best wrestling, but his effort is pretty unmatched. I like watching those kind of fighters that every time you see them, you're like, they're going to go out there and try to win, even if they get knocked out. And, Court is tough. I don't think I've seen him get finished or get stopped. I've seen him lose by unanimous decision, but it's hard to stop him, and it's hard to stop his work ethic, and I'm definitely excited to see him keep going forward. For the Brian Kelleher fight, it really doesn't stand out to me, so I'm just like, I have no comment on that one. But, again, it's good to see another older guy having success, later in his career, and I don't recall. I don't really remember that fight. Not to say it was, unforgettable, but or forgettable.
Actually, I do kind of recall that fight. I'm blanking on the details of how it went down. But Kelleher's somebody I always enjoy watching these fights. It's kind of like part B. He's just got a real great work ethic. He's not going to go out there and just lay on a guy. He's really working towards his finish the entire time. So that's kind of what I appreciate about his fight. Even though it went to decision against Kroom, it was an exciting fight. He didn't just go to the ground and no one was stalling for 7 minutes or anything like that. It was, I think, a pretty high-paced fight.
Yeah, and looking it up, Kelleher's got a fight coming up on March 5th on the undercard for Masvidal Covington. He'll be going against Umar Nurmagomedov, who's undefeated. So here's another chance for this, older guy to prove himself against an up-and-coming guy, or an up-and-coming guy to, possibly be thrown into title contention. Being undefeated at this level, on one of probably the biggest card of the year so far. The grudge match between Masvidal and Covington.
Yeah, and Kelleher in his fight against Kroom, I'm looking at the stats now. He had 6 out of 8 takedowns successful. And he had a lot of significant strikes, so it was a good round pound type match. He had about 6.5 minutes of control during that fight. But I do remember now that there were some definite scrambles, and Kelleher still got that hustle, which is impressive. At 35 years old?
Yeah, for sure. So let's move on to the next one, which was, one of the main cards of, the first title match of the year as I try to navigate through this. And the fight we'll be talking about will be, the fighters we'll be talking about will be Francis Ngannou and Davison Figueiredo. So let's talk about the heavyweight fight first, Colby.
Okay, well, this was, the last fight was against Gon for the heavyweight title, and I think the fight went in a direction that nobody predicted. It was so crazy to see Ngannou just getting takedown after takedown. He got 4 takedowns in that fight, and at least one of them was a huge slam. Like it was this really funny moment when Ngannou lifts up Gon completely off of his feet. He's way up in the air and goes to slam him. If you watch the video feed from the fight, look at the people who are in the audience and look at their faces as that takedown is happening, and you just see them with their mouths wide open, like, oh my god. Because these guys, got 265 pounds, like he's pushing the limit for heavyweight, and just to be able to pick up a guy like that and slam him was absolutely crazy. So, I guess in some regards, it's not too crazy for an older fighter to say the first thing they go, usually with age, is speed and power is the last thing to go. But still to be able to do a lot of the wrestling techniques does require not just power, it does require speed. He was able to get in on Gon, who everybody thought Gon's speed was beyond what Ngannou was going to be able to handle, or a lot of people thought that. And it was just really impressive that the guy who sees as the knockout king is still improving. I think what we saw in the fight before Gon, where Ngannou, when he fought Stipe, was able to defend takedowns, which he hadn't been able to do in the past. And now with this fight, we see him going for takedowns to get a win. So not only is he an older fighter and the heavyweight champion of the world, but he still seems to be improving and coming up with different strategies to win.
Yeah, no, it's not how I expected them to win. I thought they were going to knock each other out. Like you said, my reaction was the same as everyone else in the crowd. Like, what? Like, and hearing all the rumors, all the background about they know each other, he got dropped in training, he knows how to beat him, and then to see that they, for the most part, canceled each other out, except for the wrestling, which he did an amazing job of implementing. So it's great to see that even at an older age, these fighters can adapt and grow and change with the fight game. Especially they're going to have to with these young, up and coming fighters. The heavyweights are known for standing with each other, and it was fun to see him, grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Figueiredo, he's actually 34, not 35, but still getting up there in age. His last fight against Moreno was pretty impressive. I picked Moreno to win, but he ended up going all 5 rounds and ended up winning by unanimous decision. Although it was a close fight, it was really competitive. It's not like it was a complete blowout. But to be that competitive, at 34, at the highest levels of combat sports is pretty impressive.
No, absolutely. Figueiredo, it's going to be interesting because I feel like some people want another rematch, and I don't know how I feel about it because it's so close. Like I understand wanting it. I understand I think I could watch him fight forever, honestly. But it's like time to keep the division moving forward and see who's up next. I really don't know who's up next for the title shot, but Moreno's got a couple years left. He's an up and coming guy, young guy, and he was able to be successful early on. And Figueiredo, I think, can hopefully at this point just pick, you know, top fights with, you know, the, I don't even know who would be, like, you know, maybe they're smaller than Aldo, right? So wasn't Garbrandt just dropped down to that division? Where's the other old Team Alpha Male guy that just came back from the steroid suspension? Dillashaw, yeah. Is he at that weight or is he lower?
I don't recall. I think he's at 135, but
Yeah.
I feel like we got a situation with Figueiredo and Moreno where these are these top two guys, and the reason why I think it worked for they had 3 fights in a row, you know, Moreno versus Figueiredo for the title, is because they're so close, they're so competitive. The first fight they had was a draw. The second fight they had, Moreno ended up winning by submission. The third fight, Figueiredo wins by unanimous decision, but it's still close and competitive. And I feel it's kind of like Brunson versus Covington. I'd still like to see them fight another fight without Covington having to go through other guys, because I feel like they're the top 2 guys, and no one else in the top 5 of that division is close to Covington or Rosen. I feel like they're on their own level. I would just see the 2 titans go at it again and again. I mean, until someone else rises up to the ranks that people really think have a chance at beating the champ.
Yeah, and to kind of go back over it, Ngannou, 35 years old, Davison at 34, you know, getting up there in age, but, you know, putting a smackdown on these younger guys. It's great to see. And then, I don't know if it was this fight card as well, looking for, Victor Henry, who was fight number 6 of the night, at 34 years old with the unanimous decision win. And that's it for this fight card. So on to the next one, which was
just real quick on these older fighters that are still being competitive, still winning fights. How much of this do you think is due to science improving around nutrition and recovery and those kinds of things, or do you think it's always been this way, and there's just been not as much visibility, obviously, like with UFC not being as popular 20 years ago. But can you go back and think of as many, were there as many older fighters 20 years ago in UFC or in MMA that were having as much success into their late 30s and 40s?
I feel like, you know, UFC like won in those where like where you saw like the oldest batch of fighters, because you know thinking back to like the Tank Abbotts and Dan Severns and all them who were just like looked like they were 40, 50 years old. I will say then for a while there was just all these younger guys up and coming, the GSPs, Anderson and them who were in their 20s. And then it got back to the older fighters again, with Randy Couture being, heavyweight champ, 2-time champ. Randy Couture beating Tito Ortiz, I feel like was one of the first kind of big, older versus younger fights. Even recently, Daniel Cormier, being in his 40s and still winning. One of the things I think helps those fighters is that they started, later in their career, combat sports later in their career. So they haven't taken the damage, they haven't taken the knockouts that some of these other guys have. And interestingly enough, all these older fighters that, I'm thinking about Randy Couture, Daniel Cormier, were all wrestlers. So in wrestling, they're not constantly getting punched in the head, getting slammed on their head. Whereas all these other guys who trained kickboxing and stand-up for all these years, I think of Vanderlei, I think of Shogun Hua, I think of all these guys who are known for these battles, in their 30s were just not the same and just, crumbling after one punch. Even Chuck Liddell. And then you see Randy Couture and Daniel Cormier, in their 40s, still lasting, still being able to take big shots, but I think it's because they started taking shots later on in their life that they were able to resist or last longer. Now I definitely think it's better training, better preparation. There's fighters like Max Holloway who don't believe in sparring in preparation for a fight. because, you know, there were questions about his well-being and his sanity at one point. He was slurring during a press conference. And it seems like from that point on, he realized, I'm prepared. I know how to fight. I don't need to fight in training. Let me just go in and fight. And it's been cool to see people, adjust and embrace that.
Yeah, and how crazy is that? Sparring, going into the highest levels of combat sports, when you go to these fights, and then like that fight against Cater, where Cater's an absolute animal, and Holloway just made him look silly. He was clowning him. He was just untouchable. He was like the immortal. How old is Holloway now?
I don't know.
I feel like he's not that old. I feel like he's maybe 30 now.
We looking it up. 30 years old.
Yeah, he's only 30.
And the crazy part is he's going out there and not just like beating people up. He is just floating around them and just like having fun in there, like dancing around them, talking smack, even giving them pointers. I remember during the Cater fight, he was trying to tell them like, keep your hands up, or like, watch this, what, like, just that's amazing.
Yeah. Right. Who's the next old guy up on the?
So in this one, this fight card was Alexis Davis, who is 37. A unanimous decision win over Julia. How would you say her last name? Stoliarenko. On that fight card. And I think that might be it from this fight card, because the next one we're going to talk about is recent, I recall. The next one we'll be looking at will be Jared Canyoneer versus Derrick Brunson.
Okay. This was
just last weekend.
Yeah.
So Jared Canyoneer with a great win over Derrick Brunson. Jared at 37, showed he's got power, he's got speed, he's got strength, everything. That was an exciting fight to watch for sure.
Yeah, and Jared, his last few fights, I mean, before the win against Brunson, he had won against Gastelum. He did lose to Whitaker, but before that, won against Hermanson, won against Silva. So, he's fighting top guys for sure at the stage. He may be next up for the title. At least that's what he was calling out after he beat Brunson in his last fight, which would be awesome to see a guy at 37, fight for a title. I think we do see, more of the heavier guys being able to last longer in their career. So I don't know if you can recall at middleweight, who's the oldest person you can recall winning the title at middleweight. But 37, I feel like that's got to be up there. It's got to be in the top, 2 or 3 in terms of older guys who would be fighting for a title at middleweight.
No, absolutely. They'll both get a couple months off, and this is one of my hopes for fight of the summer, to be the blockbuster, maybe 4th of July, maybe the first one for June. I don't know, but this is going to be a fight to watch for sure. And then also on this card we had fights number 9 and 10. Andre Arlowski as the oldest fighter we're going to be talking about at 43, and Bobby Green, who will be fighting, I believe, this next weekend at 35. You want to talk about Andre first, Chloe?
Andre, oh my God, it was so great to see him going against this younger guy who's 29. The guy Bandera, I say his last name. A guy just entering his prime going against Andre Arlowski, a guy who's 43 years old and has been, in this game for so long, had so many fights, and this ended up being Arlowski's third win in a row. So he beat Sherman, he beat Felipe, and now he beat Vandera. I mean, he hasn't knocked him out. He's won by decision, but Arlowski still looks like a competitive, maybe top 15 fighter at heavyweight at 43 years old, which is crazy.
Yeah, Arlowski. We've seen, like, he was on the first pay-per-view fights I ordered like in 2005, and and I was so happy to watch him win when he beat Tim Sylvia in less than a minute, dropped him, went straight ankle lock. He at one point was, I thought, the person that had the best boxing. He had great hands. I remember, I believe this fight after that, he beat Paul Buentello like in seconds, which was the craziest knockout I've seen in a while, where he did an overhand right, and he goes for a takedown, but really Paul Buentello slumped over Arlowski, and like you just see them like stop the fight, and you're like, what happened? And it was like they just came both overhand right. Buentello fell asleep, fell on him, and they stopped it. Probably one of my favorite KOs because it just, after this weekend watching Hill beat Walker, those knockouts that just make people look like they're just like, pounds of, like bags of flesh or, like bags of flour, they just slump over dead weight. You can't contest that kind of victory. There's always the flash knockouts that people say, I was still awake, I was still fighting back, whatever. Those kind of knockouts, you're like, you were out for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, Walker, man, I was confused for the first few seconds when that punch landed, because he fell in such a strange way where his body just kind of stood up a little bit, went stiff, and he went back like a tree falling over. Yeah, that was a crazy fight to watch. So, Arlowski isn't getting those definitive victories like that, but he still looks great. And he was heavyweight champion 16, 17 years ago now at this point, and still having competitive fights. How much longer do you think he can go?
I think he definitely needs to start planning his exit, and I don't know if picking top level fights is the way to go. Fighting, some of those kind of I don't know, like Pride Fighting Championships back in the day would have like their showcase fights, and it was just like circus attraction kind of fight. But people tuned in, and I feel like Andre needs just top names. Get him an older fighter. Maybe, I don't know where the Nogueira brothers are at, but like somebody like that you're like, they're not going to hurt each other too bad because they're not, they're both not at 100%. I just don't want to see him get put out like some of these other older fighters have, where they just, I think of like Shogun fighting some of these younger guys and just getting just obliterated, and just, I don't want to see that. Let Arlowski, fight against somebody his own age. Which sounds weird.
Not a terrible fighter, but yeah, definitely nowhere near his prime anymore. So I feel like Dana doesn't want to see a lopsided fight like that. As much as he probably wants to see a knockout, and it's exciting, there are certain situations where a knockout is just sad. To see a powerful guy in his prime go out against a beloved old fighter and destroy him. Not enjoyable to watch. So my hope for Arlowski is maybe he gets one or two more fights. He goes out on like a 5-fight win streak. But I hope it's announced in advance so the UFC can prepare a and Arlowski. Man, can you imagine the reels they can put together for Arlowski spanning, over 20 years of fights, the highlights, the I feel like that you can make an incredible retirement video for Arlowski on one of his next 20 fights.
Yeah, and Bobby Green, him being up in age and then doing a quick turnaround, fighting a week ago to fighting this weekend. What's that, 2 weeks? Against, an up-and-comer who is highly touted, highly regarded. Probably going to wrestle. I'm excited to see him hopefully keep this up. I think with this fight this weekend, win or lose, it's not going to damage his, the value of his stock too much because he's taking a short notice fight against somebody who is such a strong grappler, a strong wrestler. I am rooting for him to win, to pull the upset. If he loses, I'm like, well, he had 2 weeks to prepare for this guy who's been training, for a main event for a while. What are your thoughts, in his upcoming fight?
Well, just real quick to touch on his last fight, I think it's important to point out he had 188 significant strikes in his last fight and had a pretty definitive decision win over Hakuras. This is just another impressive older fighter. So with Bobby Green, he's a guy, I guess the surprising part to me is, he's not up at the point at 35, but he still seems like he has a lot of speed, which, like I said, that speaks to me that's the first thing to go with some of these older fighters. But I feel like Bobby Green is, I'm not sure if he's truly a contender at this point. He had losses to Morgan, he had losses to Jeff, he had a win against Quinta, now against Hakuras. But I feel like he's definitely a top 15, top 10 guy who can put on really competitive fights in probably the top division and might have 55 pounds. So I don't expect him to win against Makhachev. Makhachev, his wrestling is just so on point. I don't see how Bobby Green is going to be able to contend with that, especially with the short notice that he's had to prepare for the fight. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see Bobby Green competing in that division in his last fight. I don't see him slowing down. I feel like he could have another 5, 6, 7, 8 fights maybe that are still competitive with the top guys.
Yeah, and real quick, going over some of these other fighters on this fight card, we had fight number 3, Douglas Silva de Andrade at 36 years old, Jeremiah Wells at 35 years old with the victory, and Maxim Grishin at 37 years old. So this is more along the lines of what I think I'm used to seeing is like the older guys started like at the bottom, starting off the night. That's super interesting to see that the oldest guys on this fight card, well, besides Arlowski, all fought very early on in the night. Like, it's just me kind of having the sense of humor that I have. I'm like, they're trying to put him to bed early. Oh, just super disrespectful.
Yeah, I've never said these guys.
No, I'd probably be asleep before I got a chance to talk to him. I nap all day long, so I'm not one to talk. I have a late bedtime, but only because I try to nap. And then now moving on to this past weekend. Oh, well, that's this coming one. We had Parker Porter and Jim Miller. And they had great... Well, they were fun to watch, especially Jim Miller. Go ahead and talk about Parker Porter at 36 winning this weekend, Colby.
Yeah, I mean, it was... I was a little bit surprised that he won. I don't feel like it was a robbery, but it was one of those opponent had a few more significant strikes than he did, but he had Porter had more control time and more takedowns. But the thing that really surprised me in the fight was the hustle that Porter had when it came to pursuing the wrestler. It seemed like in the stand-up, he was a little bit behind, maybe because of the reach. He was kind of quite a bit taller, and he just didn't turn at all. He's like, okay, I'm not going to win the stand battle, so I've got to take this to the ground, or I've got to clinch him up, and he just pursued him pretty much nonstop, and was able to, get that control, get the neck close, was able to land some punches. But I thought he looked really good. I don't know really if Porter's going to be a contender or a top-5 guy. I don't quite see that with how the heavyweight is back right now. But definitely putting on better fights, and I like watching that fight.
Yeah, Porter, I don't know what's going to be coming up for him, because that, wasn't a showcase or a standout kind of victory. I, liked watching it because they were pretty evenly matched. But at 36, you got to wonder, like, what's left for him. Like, who else is he going to fight? Arlowski. But I don't want to see Arlowski get knocked out. I don't know. Like, it's just hard. I'd hate to be matchmaker for some of these guys, especially when they don't, come out and win definitively, or, show that they are changing, growing, adapting. Versus somebody who was the fight after, Jim Miller, at 38 years old, knocking people out. And you're not seeing there's a lot of decision wins at all ages, all weight classes. But, at 38 years old, him changing, improving, adapting, growing, everything, it just shows that, he's not a person that you think of as like a martial artist or whatever. I've always thought of him as like a wrestler. But at this point, it's hard to deny, like, this guy is a mixed martial artist. Definitively. He's got striking, he's got grappling, and it's happened, like, you can watch it all on UFC. Like, you can just watch his career play out, and it's cool to be able to do that with a fighter.
One of the most important things to do fighters, can they still be competitive, and can they put on an entertaining fight, and is still being competitive and still putting on a good fight, even when he loses. He's not getting completely dominated.
No, for sure. I'm excited to see who he fights next. Are they going to put him up against another up and comer? Are they going to have him, fight another older fighter? He's going to be playing spoiler, I think, for a while, and that's great to see. Him show these young guys who, this last fight there wasn't much talking. There wasn't like, I'm going to knock him out, send him into retirement type of thing. But maybe they need to put him up against one of those kind of fighters to just like, I want to see like a grudge match, and I want him to prove them wrong. Because this last fight, they were super respectful, which is great to see that side of martial arts. But, as he's getting up there, like, again, I want those circus, freak show type of fights for him, where it's like, yeah, like, every fight from now on, I'm going to be watching. But we've been watching all of Jim Miller's fights for a couple of years now, so.
I don't know if I want to see a sideshow, but definitely want to see a fight where it has meaning, and for him, he's not going to get the meaning out of his fights in terms of being on the road to the title. So he needs to have some other kind of meaning to the fight. Like I said, yeah, so if it's a grudge match or something like that, I think that would be great. I don't want to see him fight, Logan Paul or Jake Paul or whatever. But yeah, something that would spice up the fight story a little bit, so that makes it a little bit more entertaining. I don't know if Jim Miller seems like a nice guy, so I don't know if he has anything left in his past. He's got a lot to drop on in terms of past moments. To
the grudge matches. And then, and to top off this fight card, we had Chaz Skelly at 36, get a good victory, TKO, which was very impressive. And then we had fight number 3 of the night, Chad, I don't know how to say his last name. And the Liger? And Hilliger? Chaz Skelly was definitely a good fight to watch. I was excited to see that. He's one of those fighters that, I don't know, like there's what I would call like a definitive wrestler build in a way, like the lanky, the no, you're a wrestler, Colby, and there's like obviously ripped wrestlers, like you think of Brock Lesnar, all just like and you see Chaz Skelly, who just doesn't look athletic at all, doesn't have an athletic body, got like ribs poking out.
Yeah, with a lot of these wrestlers, in my experience, the really good ones typically aren't super ripped because of the amount of conditioning that they do. They end up cannibalizing their muscles. So a good example of this is like Ben Askren. If you look at Skelly and you look at Ben Askren, I think they're kind of similar. These guys aren't ripped just because of the amount of conditioning that they do. It's impossible to have that definitive muscle tone. I remember seeing that a lot in wrestling, where you see a super ripped guy go against a guy who kind of looks like Skelly, and then the guy who looks like Skelly ends up winning because his conditioning is so much better than the guy who's got all that muscle. It's harder to go for 15 minutes. So I mean, in wrestling matches, they go on for 7 minutes, full power in wrestling. So to be able to go for 15 minutes with a wrestling kind of style, you can't do that without great conditioning. And a lot of wrestlers you'll see like Skelly, like you said, it looks like, does not look like a terrifying figure. But I'm sure his conditioning is off the charts.
Yeah, no, and judging by his victory, like, it was very definitive. Like, there was no questions about... I was watching it and I was like, he can't punch, he can't kick. And then sneaking in those little elbows, I feel like elbows are super something that I've been looking at lately. Looking at Bam Bam's win over Derrick Lewis, like, they both swing hard. Difference was... Bam Bam threw in a couple elbows, and just, the force they're able to generate with those, put somebody to sleep who'd never been put to sleep before. And, watching the elbows in this fight, they make a huge difference. The amount of torque, the amount of momentum, everything that they can generate is super kind of scary. Like, just shutting people off just like that.
Yeah, and with Skelly, he actually has some good striking. I would say necessarily the best striking technique, but it was very effective striking, I think, because of how good of a wrestler he is. We've seen this with Khabib. Khabib, when you see him punch, it does not look like, you don't look at that and say, oh, that's great striking technique. But I feel like he was able to land on some of the guys like Khabib did against Conor McGregor, because they're so worried about the wrestling, it opens up the striking. We saw, I think, in that fight, Skelly was able to land some punches because the guy was so worried about the wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. So, we have a couple of these fighters fighting this weekend. Bobby Green. In a couple weeks from now, we have Kelleher fighting. Love them, hate them, want to see him retire, whatever. With these older fighters, they're continuing to impress, show out in great fashion. There's other older fighters we didn't mention. They had some losses. Derrick Lewis at 37, is an older fighter who has, up until his last fight, was winning consistently, had a couple title shots. So it's great to see for people like myself who is, I'm 35, to live vicariously through them and see them win and keep me motivated and inspired and show people like these older fighters, even because you're older doesn't mean you can, you're done. You still can peak again. I don't know if you can peak again, but you can still hang and once in a while get a great victory like Jim Miller. I think. What do you think, Colby?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm 37, a couple of years older than you, so I have those days where I definitely feel more tired than I did in my early 20s, and to be able to see some of these guys who are in their late 30s, early 40s with this work ethic and still be able to push themselves and still be able to grow and progress, like King John is a great example where they're still evolving, still learning new things. I think it's super inspiring. That obviously, well beyond your 40s, you can learn ability your entire life, but seeing these guys compete at the level of competition that they're facing and still be able to be competitive is super awesome to see.
No, absolutely, and I think with that we're done with our first official live broadcast that we just discovered how to use minutes before we went live. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for likes and subscriptions. By the way, we have so much data collected through Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're at easily over 100,000 views on all social media. For something that Colby and I have been talking about for years, and finally, just through a group chat, we're like, hey, is this the year we're going to start doing this? And Colby was like, I bought the domain name, Bam Fight Club. Just all these years of thoughts and planning really kind of, on the side, and finally took the jump and the leap, and we're super happy, super excited to be watching and doing what we love and talking to people about it. And so thank you for the likes and the support, and thank you, Colby, for believing that we could do this and be like, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun. This is the kind of stuff that we talk about on a regular basis. Anyway, have it for years. Yeah, we both love MMA. We love talking about it. We love taking bets on fights. And so, glad we can share it with people.
All right. Well, with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Monday morning musings with us.